never thought I'd be the kind of woman who'd end up alone at 53, staring at divorce papers while my husband of 28 years packed his bags upstairs. The house felt unnaturally quiet that evening, the kind of silence that rings in your ears and makes your skin crawl. Just the occasional thud of dresser drawers and the soft rustle of clothes being stuffed into suitcases. Outside, the neighborhood was bathed in that perfect golden hour light that photographers chase. But inside our colonial-style house on Maple Street, everything had turned cold and colorless. I traced the rim of my wineglass with my finger, watching the red liquid catch the fading sunlight streaming through the kitchen window. 28 years of marriage reduced to property divisions and asset allocations listed in cold, legal language. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Diana, I need the combination to the safe. Robert's voice from the doorway made me flinch. I looked up at my husband, still handsome at 55 with salt and pepper hair and the same lean build he'd maintained since his college rowing days. His face had acquired a few more lines since I'd met him in law school, but time had been kind to him, unlike the way he was being to me now. "It's your birthday," I replied flatly. "Same as it's been for the 15 years we've had that safe." He shifted uncomfortably. "Right. I'll get the papers for the lake house while I'm up there." "You mean my family's lake house? The edge in—" My voice was sharp enough to cut glass. "The one my father left me? The one that's specifically excluded in our prenup?" Robert's jaw tightened. "Diana, don't make this harder than it needs to be. Caroline and I just want—" "Don't!" I held up my hand, silencing him. "Don't you dare say her name in this house." Caroline, his paralegal, 26 years old with glossy chestnut hair and the kind of smooth skin that only belongs to someone who hasn't yet lived enough to earn a few wrinkles. I'd hired her myself 3 years ago, impressed by her credentials and eager to help Robert's firm expand. Now she was the reason my marriage was imploding. Robert sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. "This isn't how I wanted things to end." Laughed, but there was no humor in it. "And how exactly did you want them to end, Robert? With me graciously stepping aside so you could ride off into the sunset with a woman half my age? Should I have blessed the union, perhaps?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. You know it's not that simple. Actually, it is that simple. You had an affair. You broke our vows. You're leaving me for someone else. I took a deliberate sip of my wine. "What's complicated about that?" His expression hardened. "What's complicated is that we haven't really been married, not in the ways that count, for years." "That's convenient. It's the truth, Diana. When was the last time we connected? Really connected? We've been living separate lives under the same roof for so long, I barely remember what it was like to feel alive with you." The words stung more than I wanted to admit. I thought of the nights I'd reached for him, only to find his side of the bed empty, the weekends I'd suggested trips or dinners or anything to recapture what we'd lost, only to be met with excuses about work and deadlines. So rather than trying to fix what was broken, you decided to find someone new, someone who hasn't had to juggle a career and raising your children, someone who hasn't stood by you through failed business ventures and your father's death and all the mundane struggles of building a life together. My voice cracked despite my best efforts to keep it steady. Robert looked away. "She makes me feel young again. And I make you feel old?" The question hung in the air between us. He didn't answer immediately, and that hesitation told me everything. When he finally spoke, his words came out in a rush. "You're not the woman I married anymore, Diana. You're too settled, too predictable. Caroline challenges me. She sees possibilities where you see practicalities. She's younger," I finished for him. "That's not fair." "No, What's not fair is you trying to convince yourself this is about some deep connection when we both know it's about the most predictable midlife crisis in the book. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Just be honest enough to admit you traded me in for a newer model because you're scared of getting old. His face flushed. You're twisting my words. Am I? Then explain it to me, Robert. Explain why, after nearly 3 decades, you're walking away from everything we've built. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache despite everything. I don't expect you to understand, but when I'm with Caroline, I feel possibilities. With you, I just feel the weight of expectation, of routine, of knowing exactly how every day is going to unfold until I die. That's called a life, Robert. That's what we built together. It's suffocating me. The words burst out of him. I look at you, and I see all the compromises, all the dreams I let go of. I see myself growing old and irrelevant. Caroline looks at me and sees someone with potential, with a future still ahead of him. I stared at him, this stranger wearing my husband's face. So I remind you of your mortality, is that it? I'm some walking memento mori while she's the fountain of youth? That's not what I— No, let's be crystal clear, I interrupted, anger finally breaking through the shock. You're leaving because I'm too old to love, because my body bears the marks of the children I gave you, because my face shows the years I've spent building the life you're now so eager to escape. Robert's expression shifted, a flash of guilt quickly replaced by defensiveness. You're being dramatic. Age has nothing to do with— Don't lie to me or yourself, I snapped. If Caroline were 53 instead of 26, we wouldn't be having this conversation. He didn't deny it. He couldn't. You're right about one thing, I said, gathering the divorce papers into a neat stack. I'm not the woman you married. That woman would have begged you to stay. She would have blamed herself for not being enough. But I've earned every line on my face and every silver hair on my head, and I won't apologize for the sin of aging alongside you. Robert looked almost startled by my defiance. For years, I'd been the peacemaker in our relationship, the one who smoothed over conflicts and found compromises, the one who kept our household running while building my own career as a real estate attorney, the reliable one, the predictable one. I never wanted to hurt you, he said quietly. And yet here we are. I gestured around our kitchen, the room. We'd remodeled together 5 years ago, with the marble countertops I'd selected, and the custom cabinets he'd insisted were worth the extra expense. You get to walk away and start fresh while I'm left with the remnants of the life you decided wasn't exciting enough anymore. He reached for his keys on the counter. I'll be staying at the Westmont until I find a place. My attorney will contact. Yours about the remaining details. Fine. A heavy silence fell between us. 28 years of shared history suddenly reduced to awkward pauses and averted gazes. The kids are coming for dinner tomorrow, I said finally. I assume you'll want to tell them yourself? Robert winced. Jesus, Diana, give me some time to figure out how to explain this to them. They're adults, Robert. Emily is 30 and Jacob is 27. They're going to figure it out pretty quickly when their father moves in with a woman younger than their sister. He had the decency to look ashamed. I'll talk to them. Just not tomorrow. Not yet. Fine, I repeated, suddenly too tired to argue. But don't wait too long. This town runs on gossip, and I won't lie for you. Robert nodded and picked up his suitcase. He hesitated at the doorway, looking back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. For a moment, I thought he might say something, perhaps offer some final words of comfort or nostalgia or regret. Instead, he simply turned and walked out. The sound of the front door closing behind him was softer than I expected. After nearly 3 decades together, I'd imagined some grand, dramatic exit, a door slamming that would echo through the house and signal the definitive end of an era. Instead, it was just a quiet click, barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator. I sat there for a long time afterward, staring at the space where he'd stood, trying to process the reality that my husband, the man who'd held my hand through 2 difficult childbirths, who'd danced with me at our daughter's wedding last year, who knew exactly how I took my coffee every morning, was gone. The house felt impossibly large and empty. I moved through the rooms like a ghost, touching familiar objects that suddenly seemed to belong to someone else's life. The framed wedding photo on the mantel, the collection of seashells from our trips to the Outer Banks, the dent in the hallway wall from when Jacob tried to ride his tricycle down the stairs. When I reached our bedroom, my bedroom now, I supposed, I opened his closet to find it half empty, the remaining hangers swinging slightly. His favorite gray sweater was still there, the one I'd given him for Christmas 3 years ago. He'd probably forgotten it in his rush to start his new life. I sank down onto the edge of the bed, clutching the sweater to my chest, and finally let myself cry. The next morning, I woke up with swollen eyes and a clarity I hadn't felt in months. Perhaps it had been building all along, this steely resolve that now straightened my spine as I showered and dressed for the day. I'd spent enough time during the night cycling through grief and shock and rage. Now it was time for action. I called my office and told my assistant I'd be taking a personal day. Then I contacted the top divorce attorney in the city, someone even more ruthless than the shark Robert had already retained. Money was no object. I'd built my own successful career alongside supporting Robert's, and I had my own resources to draw upon. Plus, there was my family's considerable wealth, carefully protected by the prenuptial agreement my father had insisted upon, despite Robert's objections all those years ago. "Eleanor," I said when my old law school friend answered, "Robert's left me for his 26-year-old paralegal, and I need the best divorce attorney you know. Someone who'll make him regret the day he ever looked at another woman." Eleanor's sharp intake of breath was followed by a string of colorful curses. "That bastard. I always thought he was too smooth by half. Give me an hour, and I'll have 3 names for you, absolute piranhas who'll leave him with nothing but the clothes on his back." "Perfect," I replied, surprised by how calm I felt. "And Eleanor? I want to handle this my way. No public scenes, no messy drama. Just clean, calculating precision." "Understood. Cold revenge is always more satisfying anyway." After hanging up, I made myself a proper breakfast, something I rarely had time for on workdays, and pulled out my laptop. As a real estate attorney, who specialized in commercial properties, I had access to databases and records that most people didn't. It was time to put my professional skills to personal use. I spent the next hour researching property records, following a hunch that had formed during my sleepless night. Robert had mentioned staying at the Westmont until he found a place, but something about the way he'd said it hadn't rung true. My husband wasn't the type to leave one situation without having another fully secured. It was one of the things I'd always both admired and found slightly calculating about him. Sure enough, after some digging, I found what I was looking for. 6 months ago, Robert had purchased a luxury condo in Riverside Heights, the trendy district popular with young professionals and wealthy empty nesters looking to downsize. The purchase had been made through an LLC that I traced back to him, clearly an attempt to keep it hidden from me. 6 months ago, while we were still planning our summer vacation to Greece, while he was still kissing me goodbye every morning and bringing me coffee in bed on Sundays. The betrayal hit me anew, a fresh wave of pain that momentarily took my breath away. But it was quickly replaced by something colder and more focused. He'd been planning this, methodically, deliberately creating an exit strategy while maintaining the facade of our marriage. But there was one detail that made me smile despite everything. The property wasn't in Robert's name, nor was Caroline's name anywhere on the deed. It was owned solely by the LLC. And as I dug deeper into the financial arrangements, I discovered something even more interesting. The condo had a tenant, a young woman who'd signed a lease 8 months ago. I pulled up the rental agreement, Courtesy of my access to the county record system, the tenant's name leapt off the screen: Caroline Weber. My husband had bought a condo and was renting it to his mistress. I leaned back in my chair, processing this information. Robert wasn't planning to stay at the Westmont at all. That was just what he'd told me to keep up appearances. He was moving in with Caroline, into the condo he'd purchased for her, where they'd probably been carrying on their affair for months. The painful clarity of it all was almost liberating. Every late night at the office, every business trip that seemed to run longer than scheduled, every time he'd been distracted or distant, it hadn't been my imagination or my insecurity. It had been this. Her. I took a deep breath and picked up my phone again. As a real estate attorney, I knew exactly how vulnerable their arrangement was. The LLC that owned the property was improperly structured, perhaps intentionally so, to make it harder to trace, or perhaps because Robert had been careless in his eagerness to set up his love nest. Either way, it was a mistake that was about to cost him. "Javier," I said when my former intern, now a successful property manager, answered his phone. "I need a favor. How quickly can you file an eviction notice?" When I explained the situation, carefully omitting any mention of my personal connection to the property, Javier didn't hesitate. "For you, Diana. I can have it ready this afternoon. Just send me the address and tenant information." "Perfect. And Javier, this needs to be handled with absolute discretion." "Of course. Client confidentiality is sacred. You taught me that." After ending the call, I sat at my kitchen table, staring out at the garden Robert and I had planned together. Years ago. The rose bushes needed pruning, and the stone path we'd laid ourselves during that sweltering weekend in July needed weeding. Little projects we'd talked about tackling someday. Now, I supposed, they were just my projects, my house, my life to rebuild. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. 3 names as promised. Called them all personally. They're expecting your call. Go get him, Diana. I smiled and reached for my coffee, now cold. As I stood to reheat it, I caught my reflection in the glass of the china cabinet. The woman staring back at me wasn't broken or defeated. Her eyes were clear, her shoulders straight. Yes, there were lines at the corners of her eyes and silver streaking through her dark hair. But there was also a determination in her expression that hadn't been there yesterday. Robert thought I was too old, too settled, too predictable. He thought he knew exactly who I was and what I was capable of. He was about to learn how wrong he was. I dialed the first number on Eleanor's list, already formulating my plan. By the time my children arrived for dinner that evening, I would be ready to tell them everything. Not just about their father's betrayal, but about how I intended to respond to it. This wasn't going to be a sad story about an aging wife discarded for a younger model. This was going to be about a woman who refused to be defined by her husband's weakness, a woman who had been underestimated for the last time. "Diana Ross for Meredith Sloan," I said when the receptionist answered. "I need to discuss a divorce strategy." As I waited to be connected, I glanced at the clock. In approximately 6 hours, Caroline Weber would be receiving an eviction notice at the door of the condo where she thought she was about to play house with my husband. And that would be just the beginning. Robert wanted excitement, unpredictability, a break from routine. I was about to give him exactly what he asked for, just not in the way he'd imagined. The eviction notice was delivered at 4:30 p.m., precisely when I knew Caroline would be arriving home from the office. I'd called in sick that day, which meant she wouldn't have seen me at work and wouldn't suspect my involvement. At least not immediately. I imagined her perfectly manicured fingers trembling as she tore open the official envelope, the confusion washing over her face as she read that she had 30 days to vacate the premises due to termination of lease agreement by property owner. I pictured her frantically calling Robert, panic rising in her voice as she realized there Love nest was being pulled out from under them before they'd even properly settled in. I didn't have to imagine Robert's reaction for long. My phone rang at 5:15 p.m. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" His voice was tight with barely controlled rage. I took my time answering, savoring the moment. "I'm preparing dinner for our children. Rosemary roasted chicken, their favorite. Would you like to join us? I'm sure they'd love to hear about your new living arrangements." "Don't play games, Diana. You know exactly what I'm talking about." I moved around the kitchen, phone pressed between my ear and shoulder as I checked the chicken in the oven. "I'm afraid I don't. Perhaps you could be more specific?" "The eviction notice." He practically spat the words. "How did you even know about the condo? Robert, darling, did you really think you could purchase a property in this city without me finding out? Real estate law is quite literally my expertise." I kept my tone light, conversational. Though I have to say, structuring the LLC that way was sloppy. "Almost as if you wanted to get caught." He exhaled sharply. "This is beneath you." "Is it? I thought I was the predictable one, the settled one. Shouldn't you have predicted this?" "Caroline is devastated. She's been living there for months. You can't just—" "Actually, I can," I interrupted, steel entering my voice. "The LLC is improperly registered, which makes the lease agreement with your mistress invalid. As I'm sure you're aware, tenant rights are significantly reduced when fraud is involved." "Fraud? That's absurd. Is it?" "Creating a shell company to hide marital assets during an impending divorce? I believe most judges would consider that textbook fraud, Robert." Silence fell on the other end of the line. When he spoke again, his voice had changed, less outraged, more calculating. This was the Robert I knew, the skilled attorney who never entered a negotiation without assessing all angles. "What do you want, Diana? What makes you think I want anything?" "Because I know you. You're not vindictive by nature. This is a message, a negotiating tactic. So let's negotiate." I laughed, genuinely amused by his attempt to regain control of the situation. "You're partly right. It is a message, but not the one you think. I'm not trying to stop you from leaving me for a woman half my age. I'm simply making it clear that you won't do it comfortably, and you certainly won't do it with assets that rightfully belong to our marital estate." "The condo was purchased with my personal funds." "Was it?" "Because our joint account shows a rather suspicious withdrawal 6 months ago, almost exactly the amount of the down payment on that property." "I'm sure my attorney will find that interesting." Another silence, longer this time. I could almost hear him recalculating his position, looking for leverage. "Diana, we were together for almost 30 years. Do you really want things to end this way, with spite and legal maneuvers?" "That's rich, coming from the man who told me I was too old to love yesterday. I never said those exact words. But that's what you meant, wasn't it? When you said I remind you of your mortality? When you said Caroline makes you feel young again?" "Let's not quibble over semantics, Robert. We both know exactly why you're leaving." The doorbell rang, interrupting our conversation. Through the front window, I could see Emily's car in the driveway. "I have to go. Our daughter is here." "Diana—" "Wait. 30 days, Robert. You and your girlfriend have 30 days to find new accommodations. I suggest you start looking immediately. Housing market's quite competitive these days." I hung up and smoothed down my dress, taking a deep breath before opening the door. Emily stood on the porch, her dark hair, so like her father's before it started graying, pulled back in a neat ponytail. At 30, she had inherited both Robert's analytical mind and my direct approach to problems. She would not be easy to fool. "Mom!" She embraced me, then pulled back to study my face. "What's going on? Your text said it was urgent family dinner. Is everything okay? Is it Dad? Is he sick?" I ushered her inside. "Your father is in perfect health, unfortunately. Come in. Let's wait for Jacob before we get into everything." Emily's eyes narrowed. She'd always been perceptive. "Mom." "Dinner first," I said firmly. "Then we'll talk. I promise. 20 minutes later, Jacob arrived, bringing a bottle of wine and his usual carefree energy. At 27, my son was the peacemaker of the family, always ready with a joke or a distraction when tensions rose. Tonight, though, even his sunny disposition couldn't brighten the atmosphere at the dinner table. "Okay, what's with the funeral vibes?" he asked finally, setting down his fork. "And where's Dad? Did someone die that I don't know about?" Emily shot him a warning look, but I shook my head. "It's all right," I said, placing my napkin beside my barely touched plate. "You both deserve to know what's happening. Your father and I are getting divorced." The silence that followed was deafening. Emily recovered first. "What? Since when? Why?" Jacob just stared, his fork suspended halfway to his mouth. "Since yesterday, officially," I answered. "As for why, your father has been having an affair with his paralegal, Caroline. He's moved out and plans to live with her." "Caroline Weber?" Emily's voice rose in disbelief. "The one who just graduated law school like 3 years ago? The one who was at the firm's Christmas party last year?" I nodded. "Holy shit," Jacob muttered. "Dad's having a midlife crisis with someone barely older than me? That's such a cliché." Despite everything, I felt a surge of affection for my children. They weren't questioning the truth of what I'd said or jumping to their father's defense. Their loyalty warmed me when I needed it most. "I know this is a shock," I continued. "It was for me too. But I want you both to know that I'll be fine. I've already contacted a divorce attorney, and I'm taking steps to protect our family's interests." Emily reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Oh, Mom, I'm so sorry. What can we do? Do you want us to talk to Dad? Tell him he's being an idiot?" I smiled at her fierce protectiveness. "That won't be necessary. Your father has made his choice, and now we all have to live with the consequences. Him, most of all." "What does that mean?" Jacob asked, his eyes narrowing slightly. I considered how much to share. My children were adults, but they didn't need to be burdened with every detail of the battle that was about to unfold. "It means I'm not going to make this easy for him," I said finally. "I've spent 28 years supporting his career, raising his children, and building a life with him. I won't be discarded without a fight." Emily nodded approvingly, but Jacob looked troubled. "Mom, I get that you're hurt. We all are. But please don't do anything extreme. He's still our dad." "I'm not planning to burn down his office if that's what you're worried about," I assured him with a small smile. "I'm simply making sure I get what I'm entitled to in the divorce. Nothing more, nothing less." That wasn't entirely true, of course. The eviction notice was just the opening move in a game Robert didn't yet realize we were playing. But my children didn't need those details. "Do you want us to stay with you tonight?" Emily asked. "We could have a movie marathon, like when we were kids." The offer touched me deeply. "Not tonight, sweetheart. I need some time alone to process everything. But why don't we plan something for this weekend? Both of you." They agreed, and the rest of dinner passed in a blur of reassurances and promises to stay in touch. After they left, both hugging me tighter and longer than usual, I poured myself another glass of wine and stepped out onto the back patio. The evening air was cool against my skin, carrying the scent of the lilac bushes Robert and I had planted when we first moved in. Stars were appearing one by one in the darkening sky, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The ordinary peace of a spring night in our quiet neighborhood stood in stark contrast to the turmoil of my life. My phone buzzed with a text message. I expected it to be one of the children, checking in again, but instead it was from an unfamiliar number. "This is Caroline. We need to talk. Please." I stared at the screen, an unexpected wave of emotions washing over me. Anger, certainly. Curiosity. And something else. A strange sort of pity for this young woman who thought she knew what she was getting into with Robert. After a moment's hesitation, I replied, "There's nothing to discuss." Her response came immediately. I understand why you hate me. But the eviction isn't just hurting Robert, it's hurting me. I can't find a new place in 30 days. Please reconsider. The audacity was almost admirable. I typed back. You should have considered the consequences before sleeping with a married man. 3. Dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again. Finally. Can we meet? Just once. Woman to woman. There are things you don't understand. I laughed out loud at that. What didn't I understand? The way a marriage could be destroyed by betrayal? The humiliation of being replaced by someone younger? The cold calculation behind Robert's actions? I was about to decline when a thought occurred to me. Meeting Caroline might actually be useful. It would give me a chance to assess exactly what I was dealing with, whether she was a willing participant in Robert's deception or merely a convenient escape route for his midlife crisis. Fine, I wrote. Tomorrow. 1 p.m. Café Lucerne on 7th Street. Don't bring Robert. Thank you, came the immediate reply. I'll be there. I put down my phone and gazed back up at the stars. 24 hours ago, my world had shattered. Now I was preparing to meet my husband's mistress for coffee. Life had a twisted sense of humor sometimes. Café Lucerne was busy. When I arrived the next day, the lunch crowd filling most of the tables with business people and young mothers with strollers. I'd chosen it deliberately for its public nature. No scenes could be made here without witnesses, and for its location near my office but far from Robert's. I spotted Caroline immediately, sitting at a corner table with her back to the wall. She looked even younger in casual clothes, jeans and a simple blouse, her hair pulled back in a loose bun. She was nervously shredding a napkin, and when she saw me, something like fear flashed across her face. Good, I thought. She should be afraid. I approached the table with deliberate calm, setting down my purse and taking the seat across from her. Up close, I could see the dark circles under her eyes, poorly concealed with makeup. She hadn't been sleeping well. Another small victory. Thank you for meeting me, she began, her voice softer than I remembered from the few times we'd interacted at firm functions. You have 15 minutes, I replied, glancing at my watch. I suggest you make them count. She took a deep breath. First, I want to say I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything to you, but I am. I never intended to fall in love with my husband, I finished for her. To destroy a 28-year marriage? To break apart a family? Which unintended consequence are we discussing? Her cheeks flushed. All of it. I know how it looks. It looks exactly like what it is, I said. A cliché. The middle-aged partner and the young, ambitious paralegal. Tale as old as time. It's not like that, she insisted, leaning forward. Robert and it wasn't some cheap fling. We connected, intellectually first. He valued my opinions, my perspective. He made me feel seen in a way no one ever has. I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped me. Of course he did. That's his specialty. Making women feel special, valued, seen. He did the same thing with me once, a lifetime ago. The problem is, Robert only sees people until he gets bored of looking. Caroline shook her head. You're wrong about him. He's deeply unhappy in your marriage. He said you two had grown apart years ago, that you were staying together out of habit and convenience. The knife twisted a little deeper. How many times had Robert and this girl dissected my marriage? How many of our private struggles had he shared to justify his betrayal? Is that what you needed to tell me? That my husband rewrote our history to soothe his conscience? Because if so, you've wasted both our time. No, she said quickly. I wanted to talk about the condo, about the eviction. I raised an eyebrow. What about it? I can't afford another place on my salary. Not in this city, not on such short notice. Everything I have is tied up in student loans and— That sounds like a personal problem, I interrupted coolly. Or perhaps a problem for your wealthy new boyfriend to solve. He's trying, but with the divorce proceedings starting, his assets are complicated right now. She looked down at her hands. I just need more time. 60 days instead of 30, please. I studied her across the table. This young woman who'd somehow convinced herself she was the hero of this story rather than the villain. Who'd slept with my husband in a condo he'd purchased while still sharing my bed. Who now had the nerve to ask me for mercy. Tell me something, Caroline, I said, keeping my voice low. When you were sleeping with my husband, did you ever think about me? Did you ever wonder about the woman whose life you were helping to destroy? Her face crumpled slightly. I told myself it was already over between you two, that I wasn't really taking anything that wasn't already lost. A convenient rationalization. I know that now, she admitted. But Robert was so convincing. He made it sound like your marriage was just a shell, an arrangement neither of you really wanted anymore. I leaned back in my chair, suddenly weary. Let me give you some advice, from one woman to another. Men like Robert don't leave their wives because the marriage is empty. They leave because they're empty. There's a hollowness in them that no amount of success or validation can fill. Caroline stared at me, uncertainty in her eyes. You think you're special, I continued. The woman who finally understood him, who awakened something in him that I never could. But you're just the newest distraction from the real problem, the one inside him. That's not true, she protested, but there was a flicker of doubt in her expression, isn't it? Ask yourself why a man who claims to love you would put you in such a precarious position. Why he would set you up in a condo through a fraudulent LLC instead of being honest about the arrangement. Why, even now, he's letting you fight his battles for him. I gestured around the cafe. Where is he, by the way? If he cared about your housing situation, shouldn't he be here pleading your case? She had no answer for that. I stood gathering my purse. The eviction stands. 30 days. If you're smart, you'll use that time to reconsider who Robert really is and what you've sacrificed for him. As I turned to leave, she called after me. He loves me. He's going to marry me once the divorce is final. I paused, looking back at her with genuine pity. Oh, Caroline. I wasn't the first woman Robert made that promise to, and you won't be the last. Her expression faltered, confusion spreading across her features. What do you mean? He said you were his first real relationship, that he married young and… I was his second wife, I said quietly. He was married for 3 years before he met me. She was his law professor. He left her for me when I was 25, just about your age, actually. Funny how history repeats itself. I walked away then, leaving Caroline staring after me, the perfect picture of shattered illusions. It was cruel, perhaps, to destroy her fantasy so thoroughly. But in a strange way, it was also a kindness. Better she learned the truth about Robert now than 10 or 20 years down the road, when she'd invested the best years of her life in a man who would never be satisfied. As I stepped out into the sunlight, my phone buzzed with an incoming email. My divorce attorney, confirming our strategy meeting for that afternoon. I smiled to myself, a cold, determined smile that would have shocked anyone who knew me before yesterday. Robert had underestimated me. Caroline had underestimated me. They both thought I would crumble, retreat, accept my fate as the discarded wife. They were about to discover just how wrong they were. The law offices of Harrison, Sloan, and Williams occupied the top 3 floors of a sleek glass building downtown. As I rode the elevator to the 42nd floor, I mentally prepared for my meeting with Meredith Sloan, reputedly the most feared divorce attorney in the city. Eleanor had warned me that Meredith's approach was aggressive, even ruthless, but that's precisely why I'd chosen her. This wasn't a time for gentle negotiations. The elevator doors opened to reveal a reception area decorated in shades of steel gray and ice blue. Everything about the space conveyed power and precision, from the minimalist furniture to the abstract art that probably cost more than most people's cars. Mrs. Ross? A young man in an impeccably tailored suit approached. Ms. Sloane is expecting. You? Please follow me. He led me down a corridor lined with glass-walled offices where attorneys and paralegals worked with focused intensity. At the end of the hall, he opened a door to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Meredith Sloane rose from behind a massive desk, extending her hand. She was a tall woman in her early 60s with silver hair cut in a severe bob and eyes that seemed to catalog every detail about me in seconds. Diana, thank you for coming in. Her handshake was firm, her voice crisp. Eleanor speaks very highly of you. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice, I replied, taking the seat she indicated. I always make time for interesting cases. She returned to her chair. And from what Eleanor told me, yours promises to be very interesting indeed. I smiled thinly. That's one way to put it. Before we begin, I should tell you my approach. Meredith folded her hands on the desk. I don't believe in dragging out divorces with emotional warfare. I believe in identifying leverage, applying pressure, and achieving favorable settlements as quickly and efficiently as possible. Does that align with your goals? Perfectly, I assured her. I have no interest in a prolonged battle. I just want what's rightfully mine, and perhaps a bit of justice along the way. There was a knowing glint in her eye. Is it that obvious? Diana, I've been handling high-profile divorces for 30 years. The ones who come to me want more than just a fair division of assets. They want vindication. I couldn't argue with that assessment. What Robert did was more than just an affair. It was a calculated betrayal. He's been planning his exit for months, hiding assets, creating shell companies, all while maintaining the pretense of our marriage. Meredith nodded, making a note. The LLC for the condo was a particularly amateur move. He should have known better. That's just what we've uncovered so far. I suspect there's more. Oh, there. Always is. She reached for a leather portfolio on her desk. I've had my team doing some preliminary research since Eleanor called. Would you like to know what we found? I leaned forward. Absolutely. Your husband has been moving money into offshore accounts for the past 8 months. Not large sums that would trigger immediate notice, just enough to build a significant nest egg outside your marital assets. My stomach tightened. How much? Just over $800,000 so far. The figure hung in the air between us. It wasn't enough to bankrupt us. Robert and I had done well financially over the years. But it was a substantial amount. More importantly, it was further evidence of his premeditation, his deliberate deception. Can we get it back? With the right judge and the right approach, yes. Meredith flipped through several pages. There's more. He's been planning to open a new firm, a boutique practice focusing on corporate mergers. He's already secured office space under yet another LLC and approached several of his major clients about following him. I felt as if I'd been punched. Robert leaving the partnership he'd helped build over the past 2 decades? That was completely unexpected. Are you certain? He's never mentioned wanting his own firm. The opposite, in fact. He's always talked about the security of the partnership. The paperwork was filed 6 weeks ago. Meredith handed me a copy of the registration documents. Ross Legal Strategies, LLC. Quite a departure from Miller, Hoffman, and Ross. I scanned the document, noting the address was in the trendy tech district, where many startups were headquartered. It was exactly the sort of place that would appeal to Caroline's generation, with its coffee bars and meditation rooms. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. He's rebranding himself, I said slowly. New firm, new girlfriend, new life, shedding everything that ties him to the past. Including you, Meredith added gently. Including me, I echoed. We spent the next hour discussing strategy. Meredith laid out a comprehensive approach that would expose Robert's financial maneuvers while positioning me as the wronged party seeking only fair treatment. The key is to move quickly, she explained. Your eviction notice was an excellent first step. It caught him off guard and demonstrated you won't be passive. Now, we need to maintain that momentum. What's our next move? A temporary restraining. Order on all his business ventures and financial accounts pending full disclosure in the divorce proceedings. It won't stop him permanently, but it will freeze everything while we get a complete picture of the assets. I hesitated. That seems extreme. It is, Meredith agreed unapologetically. But so is hiding nearly $1 million and planning a secret business while still married. The judge will likely agree that extraordinary circumstances warrant extraordinary measures. She was right, of course. I'd come to her precisely because I wanted someone who wouldn't pull punches. Still, the reality of what we were about to do, the public nature of it, the inevitable fallout, was daunting. This will get ugly, I said, more to myself than to her. It's already ugly, Diana. The difference is, now he'll be the one caught. Off guard instead of you. I nodded, resolute. Let's do it. As I left Meredith's office, I felt a curious mixture of dread and anticipation. The wheels were in motion now. There would be no going back. Ms. Ross? There's a gentleman here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he's quite insistent. I looked up from my computer to find my assistant, Tara, standing in the doorway of my office, her expression concerned. It was just past 10 a.m., and I'd been reviewing contracts for a commercial development project, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy in my professional life, despite the chaos in my personal one. Did he give a name? Martin Hoffman. He says he's your husband's law partner. Martin. Of course. Word of Robert's secret plans must have reached the firm. I briefly considered turning him away, but that would only delay the inevitable. Better to face this conversation now, on my terms. Send him in, please. Martin Hoffman had been Robert's friend since law school. They'd founded the firm together 20 years ago, along with Sarah Miller. He was a short, energetic man with an unfortunate comb-over and a reputation for brutal honesty. As he entered my office, I noted the deep furrows in his brow and the tightness around his mouth. He was angry, but trying to contain it. Diana. He didn't offer to shake hands. Do you have any idea what you've done? I gestured to the chair across from my desk. Please, sit down, Martin. Would you like some coffee? I don't want coffee. I want an explanation. Despite his protest, he sank into the chair. Robert's been served with a restraining order freezing all his business activities. The firm's accounts are being audited. Our clients are panicking. It's a disaster. I'm sorry about the disruption to the firm, I said, and I meant it. But my attorney advised me this was necessary given the circumstances. What circumstances could possibly justify this nuclear option? Martin's voice rose. For God's sake, Diana, it's a divorce, not a criminal investigation. Did Robert tell you? He's been planning to leave the firm? That he's already secured office space for his own practice and approached your clients about following him? Martin's face went slack with shock. What are you talking about? Ross Legal Strategies. His new venture. The paperwork was filed 6 weeks ago. That can't be right. He would have told me. I pushed a copy of the documents Meredith had given me across the desk. See for yourself. Martin scanned the papers, his complexion shifting from pale to flushed as he read. This is legitimate? Completely. He's been planning his exit from the firm, from his entire life, for months. Martin set the papers down slowly, his anger now visibly redirected. That backstabbing son of a bitch. Now you understand why the restraining order was necessary. He's been systematically hiding assets and making arrangements for his new life, all while pretending nothing had changed. Does Sarah know about this? I haven't spoken to her yet. Martin ran a hand over his face. This will destroy her. She just bought that house in Westlake on the strength of our partnership agreement. I'm truly sorry, Martin. I never wanted the firm to be collateral. damage in this. He nodded, seemingly lost in thought for a moment. Then he looked up at me, his expression shifting from shock to calculation. What exactly are you hoping to achieve with all this, Diana? What's your endgame? Justice, I answered simply. Robert thinks he can discard 28 years of marriage and walk away with everything he wants intact. I'm making sure he understands there are consequences to his choices. Martin studied me for a long moment. I've always liked you, Diana. You've always struck me as the reasonable one in your marriage. Don't let this situation change that. I appreciate the concern, but I'm not acting out of emotion. I'm protecting my interests against someone who's proven he can't be trusted. Fair enough. He stood, straightening his tie. For what it's worth, I think Robert's making the biggest mistake of his life, both personally and professionally. Thank you for saying that. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. Off the record, between old friends. Yes? Make him pay. Not just financially. Make him understand exactly what he's thrown away. With that, he was gone, leaving me with an unexpected sense of validation. If even Robert's oldest friend thought he deserved consequences, perhaps I wasn't overreacting after all. By late afternoon, the news of Robert's restraining order had spread throughout our social circle. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from friends expressing support or fishing for details. I ignored most of them, focusing instead on a series of emails from Meredith outlining our next steps. I was just about to leave the office when my phone rang with a call from Jacob. Mom, are you okay? I just ran into Dad at the club and he looked like he was about to have a stroke. He was with Uncle Martin and they were arguing in the locker room. Something about accounts being frozen? I sighed. I'd hoped to tell my children about the legal proceedings myself in my own way. I'm fine, Jacob. Things are just getting a bit complicated with the divorce. Complicated how? Dad was saying something about you trying to destroy his career. That's an exaggeration, I assured him. My attorney filed for a temporary freeze on some financial matters until everything can be properly assessed. It's standard procedure. It didn't sound standard from the way Dad was talking. He said you're being vindictive, trying to ruin him because he fell in love with someone else. The casual way Jacob repeated Robert's justification. Fell in love with someone else. As if it were that simple, that blameless, made something snap inside me. Your father didn't fall in love, Jacob. He made a series of calculated decisions to betray our family. He hid money, planned a secret business, and purchased property for his mistress, all while still married to me. So yes, there are legal consequences to those actions. That's not vindictiveness, it's accountability. Silence fell on the other end of the line. When Jacob finally spoke, his voice was subdued. I didn't know about any of that. Dad made it sound like you were just angry about Caroline. I'm sure he did. It's easier to paint me as the jealous, bitter ex-wife than to admit he's been systematically deceiving everyone around him. Mom, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have questioned you. It's all right. I softened my tone. I know this is difficult for you and Emily. You're caught in the middle, and your father is still your father. I don't expect you to take sides. But this isn't about sides anymore, is it? It's about right and wrong. My throat tightened with unexpected emotion. Yes, it is. After we hung up, I sat in my car for several minutes, trying to compose myself. I hadn't wanted my children to see the ugliness of this battle, but perhaps that had been naive. They were adults, and they deserved to know the truth, however painful. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You've made your point. Let's talk. Dinner tonight? My treat. Robert, reaching out with an olive branch. Or more likely, a trap. Disguised as one. He'd never been good at losing control of a situation. This was his attempt to regain the upper hand. I typed back, I have nothing to say to you that can't be communicated through our attorneys. His response came quickly. Don't be difficult, Diana. This benefits neither of us. We need to find a way forward that doesn't involve destroying everything we've built. I almost laughed at his audacity. You should have thought of that before you started hiding assets and planning your escape. Actions have consequences, Robert. You're just beginning to discover yours. This isn't you, he wrote back. You've never been cruel. I've never been betrayed like this before either, I replied. Apparently, we're both capable of surprises. I turned off my phone and started the car. I'd arranged to have dinner with Eleanor at her home tonight, a deliberately low-key evening with someone I knew I could trust implicitly. After the day's confrontations, I needed that more than ever. As I drove through the city streets toward Eleanor's neighborhood, I thought about Robert's text. This isn't you. It was a familiar refrain, one I'd heard throughout our marriage whenever I stood up for myself in ways that inconvenienced him. He'd always been so certain he knew exactly who I was, what I was capable of. Perhaps that had been his biggest mistake. Eleanor lived in a charming craftsman-style house in one of the older neighborhoods. As I pulled into her driveway, I spotted her waiting on the porch, 2 glasses of wine already in hand. She'd been my rock since law school, through my courtship, with Robert, the births of our children, and all the milestones in between. If anyone understood what I was going through now, it was her. You look like you've had quite a day, she said, handing me one of the glasses as I joined her on the porch. Swing. You could say that? I took a sip of the wine, a rich Cabernet, my favorite. Martin Hoffman showed up at my office this morning. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Robert's partner? What did he want? To berate me for the restraining order initially. But then I showed him the documentation for Robert's secret new firm. Ah, she nodded, understanding. How did he take it? About as well as you'd expect. Shock, then anger, directed at Robert, not me. Small victories. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. The beauty of it was a stark contrast to the ugliness of everything else happening in my life. Robert texted me, I said finally. He wants to meet for dinner, to find a way forward that doesn't involve destroying everything we've built. Eleanor snorted. Typical. He starts the fire, then acts shocked when you don't help him put it out. Exactly. He seems genuinely surprised that I'm fighting back, as if I should just accept being discarded after 28 years. Men like Robert rely on women being socialized to avoid conflict, Eleanor said, refilling our glasses. They expect us to prioritize peace over justice. To take the high road while they take everything else. I laughed, the first genuine laugh I'd had in days. That's Robert in a nutshell. So what's the next move in Meredith's master plan? Tomorrow we file a motion for expedited discovery, focusing specifically on the offshore accounts and the new business. She thinks we can force full financial transparency within 30 days. Eleanor whistled low. She doesn't waste time. And after that? I took another sip of wine, considering. That depends on what we find, and on Robert. If he's smart, he'll offer a generous settlement once he realizes he can't hide anything. If not, I shrugged, we proceed to a full trial. And Caroline? What happens to her? The eviction proceeds. She has, I calculated mentally, 26 days left to find new accommodations. Has she tried contacting you again after your coffee meeting? Not directly, but I heard from Jacob that she's been crying at the office, making a show of how devastated she is. Garnering sympathy. Eleanor's expression darkened. She's playing the victim while you're cast as the vindictive ex. Convenient narrative. Yes, well, narratives can change, I said, a plan already forming in my mind. And I think it's time to reshape this one. What do you have in mind? I smiled, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Tomorrow, I'm going to have a conversation with Someone who can help me change the story. Someone Robert never expected me to approach. Who? His first wife. Finding Catherine Lindstrom wasn't difficult. A simple Google search revealed she was now a tenured professor of law at the State University, specializing in ethics and gender discrimination. Her faculty page showed a striking woman in her early 60s with sharp blue eyes and silver-streaked, dark hair pulled back in an elegant knot. What was difficult was working up the nerve to contact her. In the 28 years of my marriage to Robert, we'd never spoken about his first wife beyond the basic facts. They'd been married briefly when he was in law school. It hadn't worked out. No children were involved. Robert had always dismissed that period of his life as a youthful mistake, unworthy of discussion. Now I understood why. The parallels were too damning. I composed and deleted half a dozen emails before finally settling on a simple, direct approach. Professor Lindstrom, my name is Diana Ross. I am currently in the process of divorcing my husband, Robert Ross, who I believe was once married to you. I hope you'll forgive this unexpected contact, but I'd like to speak with you about our shared experience. I've recently learned things that suggest there may be patterns in his behavior that would be valuable for me to understand. If you're willing to talk, I'd appreciate the opportunity to meet in person or speak by phone at your convenience. Respectfully, Diana Ross. I hit send before I could second-guess myself again, then tried to focus on reviewing case files for the rest of the morning. By noon, I had a response. Ms. Ross, I've been expecting this email for 28 years. I'm free tomorrow at 2 p.m. My office is in Langford Hall, room 342. Catherine Lindstrom. The brevity and certainty of her response sent a chill through me. She'd been expecting to hear from me? For 28 years? What did that mean? I showed the email to Eleanor over lunch. Well, that's cryptic, she said, handing my phone back. Are you going? Of course. I need to understand what happened between them, what patterns she's referring to. Eleanor looked troubled. Just be careful. You don't know her or her motives. She might still harbor resentment toward Robert, or toward you for that matter. I'm well past worrying about other people's resentments, I replied, stirring my untouched soup. At this point, I'll take allies wherever I can find them. Thur. University campus was bustling with students when I arrived the next day. Following signs to Langford Hall, I made my way through corridors lined with academic posters and bulletin boards until I found room 342. The door was ajar, revealing a spacious office with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and large windows overlooking a courtyard. Catherine Lindstrom sat behind a substantial desk, reading glasses perched on her nose as she marked papers with a red pen. She looked up as I knocked gently on the open door. Diana Ross, I presume? Her voice was deeper than I'd expected, with a slight accent I couldn't place. Yes. Thank you for agreeing to meet me. She gestured to the chair across from her desk. Please, sit down. Would you like some tea? I was just about to make a cup. That would be lovely, thank you. As she busied herself with an electric kettle on a side table, I took the opportunity to observe her more closely. In person, Catherine. Lindstrom was even more imposing than in her faculty photo, tall and straight-backed, with an air of unshakable confidence. She moved with deliberate grace, setting out 2 china cups with matching saucers. English breakfast, all right? She asked, her back still to me. Perfect. She returned with our tea and settled back in her chair, studying me with the same careful attention I'd given her. So, she said finally, Robert has finally done to you what he did to me. I'm sorry for that. The directness startled me. You make it sound inevitable. Wasn't it? She took a sip of her tea. Let me guess. A younger woman? Someone who works for him or with him? Someone who makes him feel seen and understood in ways you supposedly no longer do? My hands tightened. Around the teacup. His paralegal, 26 years old. Catherine nodded, unsurprised. For me, it was his study partner, 24. I was 34 at the time, practically ancient in his eyes suddenly. Though I suspect at 53, you're feeling that particular sting even more acutely. He told me I reminded him of his mortality, I admitted. That with me, he could see exactly how his life would unfold until he died. A flash of recognition crossed her face. He said almost the exact same thing to me. Word for word. With Caroline, I see possibilities. With you, I just see more of the same. He used the same line on Caroline about me, I said, a bitter laugh escaping before I could stop it. He must not be very creative. Oh, he's creative when it serves him. Creative with finances. Creative with the truth. She set down her cup. May I ask how long you were married? 28 years. We have 2 adult children. Something like genuine sadness crossed her features. That's much worse. 3 years was painful enough for me. I can't. Imagine the devastation of nearly 3 decades. That's why I'm here, I said. I need to understand who I was really married to all this time. The man leaving me now doesn't resemble the man I thought I knew. Catherine leaned back in her chair, considering me. What has your attorney told you about Robert's financial situation? Have they uncovered anything irregular? Offshore accounts. A secret new law firm in the works. A condo purchased for his girlfriend through an LLC. She nodded, unsurprised again. That tracks with his pattern. When he left me, I discovered he'd been systematically moving assets for months before he actually filed for divorce. By the time I realized what was happening, he'd managed to shield a significant portion of our marital property. Exactly what he's been doing to me, I said. Though this time my attorney caught it early. Good. Her approval was evident. Robert's greatest weakness is his arrogance. He never expects to be caught because he believes he's smarter than everyone around him. Were you able to recover what he'd hidden? Catherine's smile was tight. Eventually, but only because I had an advantage he didn't anticipate. What was that? I specialized in financial law before I moved to academia. I knew exactly what to look for and how to find it. She stirred her tea, watching the liquid swirl. The judge was quite interested in Robert's creative accounting once I presented the evidence. It nearly cost him his bar admission. I leaned forward. Do you still have documentation from that time? Records that might show similar patterns to what he's doing now? Better than that. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a manila folder. I've kept a file on Robert Ross. For 28 years. Every legal proceeding, every news mention, every career move. I've followed the trajectory of the man who tried to destroy me. She pushed the folder across the desk. I opened it to find meticulously organized documents, court filings, financial records, newspaper clippings, printed emails, all carefully annotated in Catherine's precise handwriting. Why? I asked, stunned by the thoroughness of her surveillance. After all this time? Because I knew someday another woman would be sitting where you are now, she answered simply. And I wanted to be ready. I flipped through the pages, increasingly, unsettled by both the contents and the implications of Catherine's decades-long documentation project. This is comprehensive. Thorough research is the foundation of justice, she said, as if reciting a personal mantra. When Robert left me, he didn't just break my heart. He tried to break my spirit, my professional standing, my financial security. He told colleagues I was unstable, told friends I was controlling. He rewrote our entire relationship to cast himself as the victim and me as the villain. The parallels to my own situation were unmistakable. He's been doing the same. To me. Painting me as vindictive and unreasonable for fighting back. Of course he has. It's his playbook. She gestured to the folder. It's all there. The pattern repeats throughout his career. When things don't go his way, he rewrites the narrative. Former colleagues become incompetent. Former friends become disloyal. Former wives become unstable harridans. I continued paging through the file, stopping at a section labeled Infidelities. There were dates, names, brief notes spanning decades, including, I noticed with a sick feeling, periods when I'd been pregnant with both our children. There were others, I said softly. Before Caroline. Catherine's expression softened slightly. I'm sorry. I debated whether to include that section, but I believe you deserve the full truth. I closed the folder, trying to process what this meant. Robert hadn't simply had a midlife crisis and fallen for a younger woman. He'd been unfaithful throughout our marriage, a serial philanderer who'd managed to keep his indiscretions hidden for decades. How did you gather all this? I asked finally. Various sources over the years, former colleagues, mutual acquaintances, public records. I'm not proud of the obsession, but it served a purpose. When he destroyed my life, documenting his became my way of regaining control. There was something unsettling about Catherine's dedication to tracking Robert's life for nearly 3 decades. And yet, I couldn't deny the value of what she'd compiled. May. I take this? I asked, tapping the folder. It's why I prepared it. But I should warn you, there's information in there that can't be unlearned. Things about your husband that might be easier not to know. I need to know exactly who I'm dealing with, I said firmly. No more illusions. She nodded approvingly. Then there's something else you should see. She turned to her computer, typed briefly, then swiveled the screen toward me. This arrived in my inbox 3 days ago. It was an email from Robert, dated the day after he'd moved out of our house. Catherine, it's been a long time. I hope this message finds you well. I'm writing because I've recently made some significant life changes and have been reflecting on the past. Our marriage, brief though it was, has been on my mind. I realize now that I wasn't fair to you when we parted ways. Youth and ambition make for poor excuses, but they were factors in my behavior. I'd like to apologize for any pain I caused. I'd welcome the opportunity to meet for coffee sometime, to make amends properly after all these years. Best regards, Robert. I stared at the screen, stunned by his audacity. He contacted you? Now? After 28 years? The timing is rather transparent, isn't it? Catherine's voice was dry. He's anticipating that you might reach out to me, trying to get ahead of whatever I might tell you. Did you respond? Not yet. I was curious to see if you would contact me first. I shook my head, disgusted, but not entirely surprised. Even now, he's trying to control the narrative. That's Robert. She turned the screen back. Always 3 steps ahead, or so he thinks. What will you tell him? A slow, deliberate smile spread across Catherine's face. That depends on you, Diana. What would you like me to say? The question hung between us, loaded with possibilities. I considered the situation carefully. Robert didn't know I'd already met with Catherine. He didn't know about the file she'd been keeping, or that she'd shown me his email. That gave us an advantage. Tell him you'd be happy to meet, I said finally. String him along. Let him think he's charming his way back into your good graces while we use what you've collected. Catherine's smile widened. I was hoping you'd say that. It would be satisfying. To let him believe he's succeeding, only to pull the rug out later. Exactly. I felt a surge of something like excitement, the same feeling I got when putting together a particularly complex legal strategy. He's trying to neutralize you as a threat. Let's use that against him. She studied me with fresh appreciation. You're not what I expected, Diana Ross. From the way Robert used to mention you when we had mutual acquaintances, I got the impression you were more accommodating. I was, I admitted. For 28 years, I accommodated his ambitions, his ego, his needs. I made myself smaller to let him feel bigger. Never again. Good. She tapped her fingers thoughtfully on the desk. There's something else you should... No. Something not in the file. What's that? The real reason our marriage ended wasn't simply that he found someone younger. It was that I discovered I couldn't have children. The fertility treatments had failed, and suddenly I wasn't useful to him anymore. The revelation hit me with unexpected force. Robert had always claimed their marriage ended because they'd wanted different things, the implication being that Catherine had been too career-focused to want a family. "He told me you didn't want children," I said quietly. Catherine's laugh was short and bitter. "Of course he did. It was easier than admitting he abandoned a barren wife for a fertile replacement, especially since that replacement turned out to be you." Her words stung, though I knew they weren't meant as an attack on me personally. Still, the knowledge that I had unwittingly fulfilled the role Robert had designed, the younger, fertile wife to replace the one who couldn't give him children, made me feel slightly ill. "I'm sorry," I said, though the words felt inadequate. "I had no idea." "How could you have? Robert is nothing if not skilled at reshaping reality to suit his preferences." She straightened in her chair. "But that's ancient history. What matters now is ensuring he doesn't succeed in doing to you what he did to me." "I don't intend to let him." "Good. Now, about this restraining order on his assets. Have you considered extending it to include his professional reputation?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Robert's currency isn't just money. It's prestige, connections, the respect of his peers. If you really want to hit him where it hurts, target his standing in the legal community." "How?" "The file includes documentation of several ethical breaches over the years. Nothing that would definitively get him disbarred, but enough to trigger an ethics inquiry by the Bar Association. That kind of scrutiny could be problematic for someone launching a new practice." The suggestion gave me pause. Using the information to protect my financial interests in the divorce was one thing. Actively trying to damage Robert's professional reputation felt like crossing a line into true vindictiveness. Catherine seemed to read my hesitation. "Too far?" "Maybe," I admitted. "I want what's rightfully mine, and I want him to face consequences for his deception. But I don't want to become someone I don't recognize in the process." She nodded, seemingly unsurprised by my response. "Fair enough, though I suspect Robert won't exercise the same restraint." "Probably not. But I need to live with myself when this is over." "A wise perspective." She glanced at her watch. "I have a faculty meeting in 15 minutes, but before you go..." She pulled a business card from her desk drawer and wrote something on the back. "This is my personal number. Call anytime, day or night, if you need anything. Advice, a sympathetic ear, or just someone who truly understands what you're facing." I took the card, unexpectedly moved by the gesture. "Thank you. For everything." As I gathered my things to leave, Catherine stopped me with one last question. "Diana, do you know if Robert's father is still alive?" "No. He passed away about 15 years ago. Why?" "Just curious." Something flickered in her eyes, a thought or memory she chose not to share. It might not be relevant anymore. I wanted to press her on the cryptic comment, but her tone suggested she'd said all she intended to on the subject. I thanked her again and left, the heavy folder tucked securely under my arm. As I drove home from the university, my mind raced with everything I'd learned. The man I'd been married to for nearly 3 decades was more calculating, more duplicitous than I'd ever imagined. The affairs during my pregnancies, the systematic pattern of discarding women when they no longer served his purposes, the carefully constructed narratives he created to justify his actions. I felt a complex mixture of emotions: anger at his betrayal, disgust at his manipulation, grief for the marriage I now understood had never been what I thought it was. But beneath it all was something unexpected: relief. The relief of finally seeing clearly what had been obscured for so long. When I pulled into my driveway, I was surprised to find Emily's car already there. My daughter was sitting on the front steps waiting for me. As I approached, I could see she'd been crying. "Emily, what's wrong? Did something happen?" She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but her expression resolute. "Dad came to see me at work today. He wanted me to talk to you, to convince you to drop the restraining order." I sat beside her on the steps. "What did you tell him?" I told him. I wasn't getting involved. She wiped at a stray tear. "But then he started saying all these things about you, that you were being irrational, vengeful, that you were trying to destroy him because you couldn't accept that he'd fallen in love with someone else. And you believed him?" I kept my voice gentle, non-accusatory. "No, that's just it." She met my eyes directly. "For the first time, I really listened to how he talks about you, the way he twists everything to make himself the victim. It was like suddenly seeing a pattern that's been there all along." I placed my hand over hers. "I'm sorry he put you in that position." "Don't be. It needed to happen." She took a deep breath. "Mom, I found something. After Dad left, I was going through some old photographs at his office. He asked me to clear out some personal items before the auditors arrived. There was a box in the back of his filing cabinet with letters, photos." She reached into her bag and pulled out a manila envelope. "These were hidden among his old case files. I think you should see them." I opened the envelope to find a stack of photographs. Robert, with various women over the years, in intimate situations that couldn't be dismissed as professional or platonic. There were also hotel receipts, handwritten notes, even a few pieces of jewelry in small boxes with cards attached. "He kept trophies," I said, feeling numb. Emily nodded, her expression pained. "There's more. I found financial records, accounts I didn't know about, investments under different names. And this." She handed me a folded document. It was a paternity test from 15 years ago, confirming Robert was not the father of a child whose mother's name had been redacted. "I don't even know what to do with this information," Emily said, her voice breaking slightly. "I feel like I never really knew him at all." I put my arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. "We're going to be okay," I promised. "All of us. This doesn't change who we are, only who we thought he was." As we sat together on the steps of the home Robert and I had shared for decades, I felt a strange sense of peace settling over me. The path ahead would be difficult, messy, painful, but at least now I was walking it with my eyes fully open, and I wasn't walking it alone. The evidence Emily had discovered transformed my divorce strategy overnight. My attorney Meredith could barely contain her excitement as she spread the photographs and documents across her conference table. "This is the mother lode," she said, carefully placing each item in a protective sleeve. "With these and Professor Lindstrom's file, we have documented proof of systematic infidelity, financial fraud, and intentional dissipation of marital assets spanning decades." I watched her work, feeling oddly detached. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a strange, hollow sensation. These artifacts of betrayal should have devastated me, but instead, I felt almost nothing, as if my capacity for pain had been exceeded, leaving only numbness in its wake. "What happens now?" I asked. Meredith looked up, her eyes gleaming with the particular satisfaction of an attorney who knows victory is within reach. "Now we schedule a settlement conference. Present a fraction of what we have, just enough to let Robert and his lawyer know we could bury him if this goes to court. And if he refuses to settle, he won't." She arranged the photographs in a neat row. No man this calculating would risk his reputation being shredded in open court. Especially not with his new firm about to launch. She was right, of course. Robert's carefully constructed image as a respectable attorney with an impeccable ethical record was the foundation of his professional success. The prospect of these photographs, these trophies of conquest, becoming public record would be unthinkable to him. "There's something else," I said, pulling the paternity test from the pile. "This raises questions I'm not sure I want answers." 2. Meredith examined the document. "Negative results. He's not the father. But he took the test for a reason. Someone thought he might be. I hesitated, voicing the fear that had kept me awake last night. What if there are others? Tests that came back positive? Children I don't know about? She set the paper down, her expression softening slightly. We can investigate that possibility if you want, but I'd recommend focusing on the divorce first. One battle at a time. I nodded, grateful for her pragmatism. You're right. Let's stick to the plan. As I left her office, my phone buzzed with a text from Catherine Lindstrom. Coffee with Robert scheduled for tomorrow, 10 a.m. at Westfields. He seems eager to clear the air. How should I play this? I smiled despite everything. Robert had taken the bait, rushing to neutralize what he perceived as a threat. He had no idea that Catherine and I had already compared notes, that his attempt to rewrite history with her would only provide more ammunition for our case. I typed back, be receptive but non-committal. Let him think he's convincing you. See? What he volunteers about the current situation. Her response came quickly. I should record this performance. He'll deserve a Lifetime Achievement Award in gaslighting. The unexpected humor lifted my spirits. It was oddly comforting to have found an ally in the woman whose life Robert had upended before mine, as if we were now part of some exclusive club, bound by our shared experience of loving and losing the same deeply flawed man. The next morning, I decided to visit the condo Robert had purchased for Caroline. With 23 days remaining before her eviction, I wanted to assess the property myself, partly out of practical consideration for its value as a marital asset, and partly, if I'm honest, out of morbid curiosity about the love nest my husband had created for his mistress. I parked across the street, observing the sleek, modern building with its glass balconies and minimalist architecture. It was exactly the sort of place that would appeal to someone Caroline's age, trendy, central, designed to project success and sophistication. The complete opposite of our colonial home in the suburbs, with its creaking floorboards and lived-in comfort. As I sat watching, the building's front door opened and Caroline herself emerged. She was dressed for work in a tailored pantsuit, her chestnut hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She paused on the sidewalk, checking her phone, then began walking toward the coffee shop on the corner. Without fully thinking through my decision, I got out of my car and followed her. Something about seeing her in this context, going about her normal routine, oblivious to my presence, made me want to confront her again. Not with anger this time, but with the truth she deserved to know, about the man she thought she loved. The coffee shop was crowded with morning commuters. Caroline joined the line, still absorbed in her phone. I approached and stood directly behind her, close enough that when she finally looked up and noticed me, she physically startled. "Mrs. Ross," she gasped, her composure momentarily shattered. "What are you doing here?" "Getting coffee," I replied calmly. "Same as you. And it's Ms. Ross now, technically." Her eyes darted around nervously, as if searching for an escape route. "I have nothing to say to you." "That's fine. I have plenty to say to you." The barista called, "Next!" and Caroline stepped forward, fumbling with her wallet. I waited patiently, as she ordered and paid, then followed her to the pickup counter. "Please leave me alone," she said, her voice just above a whisper. "This is harassment." "No. Harassment would be showing up at your workplace, making a scene in front of your colleagues. This is just a conversation in a public place." I kept my tone neutral, reasonable. "I think you'll want to hear what I have to say." "I doubt that. It concerns some photographs, and financial records, and a particularly interesting paternity test from 15 years ago." Her head snapped up, confusion evident in her expression. "What are you talking about?" "Robert's secrets," I replied simply. "The ones he's kept from both of us." The barista called Caroline's name, and she collected her coffee with shaking hands. After a moment's hesitation, she moved to a small table in the corner, away from the main crowd. I followed, taking the seat across from her. "You have 5 minutes," she said, her jaw tight. "Then I'm leaving." "Fair enough." I placed my purse on the table between us, a physical barrier. My daughter found a collection of mementos Robert has kept over the years. Photographs, hotel receipts, personal items from women he's been involved with. Quite a substantial collection, spanning most of our marriage. Caroline's face remained impassive, but a slight tightening around her eyes betrayed her discomfort. "If you're trying to convince me he's had other affairs, I already know that. He's been honest with me about his past." "Has he?" I couldn't help the small, knowing smile that formed. "Did he tell you about the affairs during both of my pregnancies? Or the one with his partner's wife 7 years ago? Or the paternity test he took when another woman's husband became suspicious?" Each question landed like a physical blow, the color draining from Caroline's face with each revelation. She clutched her coffee cup as if it were a lifeline. "You're lying," she said, but there was uncertainty in her voice. "You're just trying to drive a wedge between us." "I have no reason to lie. The photographs, the receipts, the test results, they all exist. My attorney has them now." I leaned forward slightly. "Caroline, I'm not here to hurt you. Strange as it may seem, I actually want to help you avoid making the same mistake I did." "What mistake?" Her voice had lost its defensive edge, replaced by genuine confusion. "Believing Robert is capable of fidelity or honesty." I sighed, feeling a surprising surge of compassion for this young woman. "He's not leaving me because he found true love with you. He's leaving because it's what he does. He moves on when relationships become inconvenient, or when someone newer, younger catches his eye." She shook her head stubbornly. "Our situation is different. We have a genuine connection. I'm sure you do, just as he had with me and with his first wife before me." I held her gaze steadily. "Did you know he left Catherine because she couldn't have children? That he told everyone she was too career-focused when the truth was she was devastated by failed fertility treatments?" Caroline's eyes widened slightly. "He said they wanted different things." That's his standard line. The reality is much uglier. I checked my watch. Her 5 minutes were nearly up. "Listen, I don't expect you to believe me today. But when the eviction date approaches and he hasn't found you a new place to live, when he starts making excuses about the divorce proceedings taking longer than expected, when he begins staying late at the office again, remember this conversation." Stood to leave, but Caroline's voice stopped me. "Why are you telling me this? Why not just destroy him with what you've found? You clearly have enough ammunition." It was a fair question, one I'd asked myself repeatedly since discovering the extent of Robert's deception. "Because this isn't just about punishing him," I answered honestly. "It's about not letting him continue to damage lives unchecked, including yours." Something shifted in her expression, a crack in the defensive wall she'd built. "The paternity test. Was it positive?" "No. But the fact that he needed to take one at all says something, doesn't it?" I left her sitting there, staring into her untouched coffee, the reality of her situation seemingly hitting her for the first time. When I arrived at my office, I found an unexpected visitor waiting in the lobby. Jacob, looking uncharacteristically, somber in a suit and tie. "Mom." He rose quickly, embracing me. "I need to talk to you. In private." I led him to my office, concern mounting. My son rarely visited me at work, and never without calling first. Something was clearly wrong. "What's happened?" I asked as soon as the door closed behind us. Jacob paced the small space, running a hand through his hair, exactly as his father did when agitated. The similarity made my heart twist. "I had lunch with Dad yesterday," he began. He wanted to explain his side of things, to make sure I understood why he was leaving. "That's understandable." "No." "Mom, you don't get it." Jacob stopped pacing, his expression pained. He wasn't just defending himself. He was recruiting me. Recruiting you? For what? To convince you to drop the restraining order. To testify about how unstable you've been lately if the divorce goes to court. His voice cracked slightly. He wanted me to spy on you, essentially. Report back what you and your attorney are planning. I sank into my chair, genuinely shocked despite everything I'd learned about Robert's character in recent days. Using our son as a pawn was a new low, even for him. What did you tell him? I said I'd think about it. Jacob's eyes met mine, fierce with loyalty. I played along to see how far he'd go. It was disturbing. He kept saying how your vindictiveness was going to destroy the family, how if I really loved you, I'd help protect you from yourself. The manipulation was so transparent it would have been laughable if it weren't so cruel. I'm sorry he put you in that position, I said. Don't be. I'm glad I saw it. Jacob sat in the chair across from my desk. There's something else. After lunch, he got a call. He stepped away to take it, but I could still hear parts of the conversation. He was talking to someone about moving money, about keeping it insulated from discovery. It sounded sketchy. My attorney's warnings about offshore accounts immediately came to mind. Did he mention any specific amounts or locations? No, but he seemed worried, kept saying they needed to accelerate the timeline. Jacob hesitated. Mom, I think he's panicking. Emily told me about what she found in his office. If he's hiding even more— He is, I confirmed. We've identified at least $800,000 moved to offshore accounts in the past 8 months, probably more we haven't traced yet. Jacob shook his head, disgust evident in his expression. So he's not just a cheater, he's a thief too. Taking what belongs to both of you? Essentially, yes. What can I do to help? The question was so earnest, so filled with a son's desire to protect his mother, that it nearly brought tears to my eyes. Just keep doing what you're doing, I told him. Don't confront him directly. Let him think you're considering his request. You might hear something else useful. Jacob nodded, a determined set to his jaw. I can do that. Play the double agent. Just be careful. Your father is not who we thought he was. I don't want you caught in his crossfire. I can handle Dad. He stood, straightening his tie. I should get back to work, but I'll let you know if I learn anything else. After he left, I sat at my desk, processing this latest development. Robert was now actively recruiting our children to his side, attempting to turn them against me while simultaneously hiding even more assets. His desperation was becoming increasingly evident and increasingly dangerous. I called Meredith immediately, updating her on Jacob's information. This is good, she said after listening. It confirms he's still actively hiding assets, which strengthens our case for expedited discovery. And the attempt to manipulate your son will not play well with a judge. He's escalating, I pointed out. What if he tries something more drastic? Like what? I hesitated, uncertain how to articulate the formless dread that had been building. I don't know, but I feel like we're approaching some kind of breaking point. That's not uncommon in high-conflict divorces, she assured me. The good news is we're ahead of him. The settlement conference is scheduled for next week. Once his attorney sees what we have, this should move quickly. I wished I shared her confidence. Something about Robert's acceleration of his plans, the desperate attempts to sway our children, the hasty meeting with Catherine, the frantic moving of money, suggested he was preparing for something beyond the normal divorce proceedings, as I. If summoned by my thoughts, my phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. Just finished coffee with Robert. You need to hear about this immediately. Can you meet? I replied affirmatively, suggesting the small park near my office. Whatever Catherine had learned during her meeting with Robert, her urgency suggested it couldn't wait for a formal setting. The park was quiet at this hour, just a few mothers with strollers and elderly couples on benches. I spotted Catherine. Immediately, her tall figure pacing near the central fountain, her academic composure notably absent. "What happened?" I asked as soon as I reached her. "He's planning to leave the country," she said without preamble. "As soon as next week, potentially." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What? How do you know?" He was fishing for information about international law practices during our coffee, asking if I still had contacts in Geneva, if I knew anyone practicing in non-extradition countries. Catherine's eyes were bright with contained anger. When I pressed him on why he was asking, he gave some thin excuse about a client with international interests, but it was obvious he was lying. Did he say anything specific about timing? Not directly, but he mentioned having loose ends to tie up over the next few days, and then being ready for a fresh start. The way he said it. "Diana, he's running." The realization crystallized with terrible clarity. Robert wasn't just hiding assets or trying to manipulate the divorce proceedings. He was planning to disappear entirely, taking the hidden money with him, leaving me with nothing but an empty legal victory. "We need to move fast," I said, already reaching for my phone to call Meredith. "If he leaves U.S. jurisdiction, there's more," Catherine interrupted. "He asked about you, wanted to know if you'd contacted me, what we'd discussed." "What did you tell him?" "That you'd reached out, but I hadn't responded yet. That I was still considering whether to get involved." A small, satisfied smile crossed her face. He was visibly relieved. Thought he'd gotten to me first, neutralized the threat. Good. That buys us some time, at least. "There's one other thing." Catherine hesitated. "He asked about our fertility issues from all those years ago. Specifically, he wanted to confirm that the problem had been with me, not him." I frowned, confused by this seemingly random topic. Why would that matter now? "I'm not sure, but combined with the paternity test you mentioned," she shook her head, "it feels significant somehow, like he's tying up loose ends, making sure old secrets stay buried." A chill ran through me as connections began forming in my mind. Robert's questions about the long-ago fertility issues, the negative paternity test from 15 years ago, his systematic hiding of assets in recent months, his sudden plans to leave the country. "He's running from more than just our divorce," I said slowly, the pieces falling into place. "There's something else. Something bigger he's afraid of coming to light." Catherine nodded, her expression grim. "That's my sense as well." "But what?" I spread my hands in frustration. "What could be worse than what we already know?" "Perhaps that's what we need to find out," Catherine suggested, "before he disappears for good." As we stood there in the quiet park, the spring sunshine at odds with the dark possibilities we were contemplating, I realized we had entered a new phase in this battle with Robert. It was no longer just about securing a fair divorce settlement, or even exposing his betrayals. It was about uncovering the truth he was so desperate to escape. A flight risk injunction. Meredith's voice was crisp and decisive as she spoke to me over the phone. "We'll file it immediately, based on Catherine's testimony and the evidence of offshore accounts. It will legally prohibit Robert from leaving the country until the divorce is settled." "How quickly can we get it approved?" I asked, pacing the length of my kitchen. "With a sympathetic judge, within 48 hours. I'm calling in some favors to expedite it." There was a pause, the sound of papers shuffling. "In the meantime, we need to be strategic. If Robert suspects we're onto his plan to flee, he might accelerate his timeline." "So we don't confront him directly," I confirmed. "Let him think. He still has the upper hand while we close the net." "Exactly. Continue as if nothing has changed. The settlement conference is still scheduled for Monday. That gives us 4 days to secure the injunction and complete our investigation into whatever else he might be hiding." After hanging up, I stared out the kitchen window at the garden Robert and I had tended together for decades. The rose bushes were beginning to bloom, pink buds unfurling in the late spring sunshine. It seemed surreal that amid such ordinary beauty, My life had devolved into legal maneuvers and covert investigations. My phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Just heard from a colleague at First National. Robert tried to access your joint safety deposit box yesterday. Bank refused without your signature, another piece of the puzzle. Whatever Robert was preparing for, he needed something from that safety deposit box, something important enough to risk drawing attention by attempting to access it without me. I tried to remember what we kept in that box. Some jewelry, including my grandmother's pearls, important documents, birth certificates, marriage license, property deeds, and a portable hard drive containing backups of our personal files, updated yearly. The hard drive. That had to be it, but what could be on it that was so crucial to Robert's plans? I called Eleanor back immediately. The safety deposit box, I said as soon as she answered. I need to get into it today. I figured as much. That's why I already called my contact at the bank. He'll meet you there at 3 o'clock, after normal hours, so you'll have privacy. This was why Eleanor had been my closest friend for 30 years. She anticipated needs before I could even articulate them. You're a lifesaver. Just doing my part in Operation Take Down the Bastard, she replied cheerfully. Oh, and Diana? Bring your laptop. If there's anything important on that hard drive, you'll want to access it immediately. First National Bank's main branch was an imposing structure of granite and glass in the heart of the financial district. Eleanor's contact, a silver-haired man named Gregory who had apparently known her since law school, met me at a side entrance. Mrs. Ross, he greeted me formally. Please follow me. He led me through the silent after-hours bank to the vault area, using his security clearance to bypass several checkpoints. I understand this is a sensitive situation, he said as we walked. Eleanor explained that your husband attempted unauthorized access yesterday. Rather concerning. Yes, it was, I agreed, not elaborating further. The safety deposit box room was cool and quiet, walls lined with metal drawers of various sizes. Gregory located our box, number 723, and used his master key along with mine to open it. I'll give you privacy, he said, placing the metal container on a table in a small adjoining room. Take as much time as you need. I'll be just outside. Once alone, I opened the box with hands that trembled slightly, despite my best efforts to remain calm. Inside were exactly the items I'd remembered: the jewelry, the documents, and the black portable hard drive, neatly coiled with its connection. Cable. I removed everything, placing it all in the secure bag I'd brought, then connected the hard drive to my laptop. It prompted for a password, one that Robert and I had created together years ago. A combination of our children's birthdays and our anniversary date, a password that now seemed like a relic from another life. The drive contained what I expected: folders of family photos, scanned financial records, backups of work documents. Nothing immediately stood out as unusual or suspicious. I opened folder after folder, scanning their contents for anything that might explain Robert's urgency in accessing the drive. After 20 frustrating minutes, I was about to give up when I noticed a folder labeled simply PC. It was tucked away in a subfolder of Robert's personal files, easy to overlook. Inside were several documents with clinical-sounding file names, mostly PDFs and what appeared to be scanned medical records. The first file was a letter dated 17 years ago from a fertility clinic addressed to Robert. My heart began to race as I skimmed its contents. Confirming your sperm analysis results. As discussed during your consultation, the testing indicates azoospermia, a condition in which no measurable amount of sperm is present in the semen. This condition is complete and permanent in your case, making biological fatherhood impossible without significant medical intervention. I stared at the screen, trying to process what I was reading. Robert was sterile. Had been sterile for at least 17 years, possibly his entire adult life. Which meant, my hands shaking now, I opened the next document, another medical report. This one detailing the results of DNA testing between Robert and two samples labeled only as Subject E and Subject J. The conclusion was stated in stark, clinical language. The alleged father is excluded as the biological father of the tested children. This conclusion is based on the non-matching alleles observed at the loci listed above. The probability of paternity is 0%. Emily and Jacob, my children, our children, except they weren't our children at all, according to this report. They weren't Robert's biological children. The room seemed to tilt as implications cascaded through my mind. If Robert wasn't their father, then who was? And why would he have ordered these tests secretly, 17 years ago, without ever confronting me with the results? Unless? I opened the next file, a scanned handwritten letter in Robert's distinctive script, never sent. Diana, I know the truth about the children. The tests confirm what I've suspected since the fertility doctor gave me my diagnosis. They cannot possibly be mine biologically. I've debated confronting you for months, imagining the conversation we would have, the explanations you might offer, the lies you might tell. In the end, I've decided to say nothing. The children believe I am their father. They look to me for guidance, for approval, for love. Whatever happened, whatever choices were made, they are innocent. I will not punish them for your betrayal. But know this, I am aware. I am choosing to stay, to maintain our family, to preserve their sense of security. Not for you, but for them. Consider it my one great act of selflessness in a life otherwise governed by ambition and self-interest. I am not the man you think I am. But neither are you the woman I thought I married. The letter was dated 15 years ago, around the same time as the paternity test Diana had found in Robert's office, the one that had come back negative. Everything suddenly aligned with terrible clarity. Robert had discovered he was sterile, secretly tested his paternity of our children, confirmed they weren't biologically his, and then decided to stay, to raise them as his own without ever confronting me. But why document it all? Why keep these records if he'd decided to maintain the facade? The final file in the folder was the newest, dated just 3 months ago. It was a private investigator's report detailing the current whereabouts and circumstances of someone named Michael Cordain. The name hit me like a physical blow. Michael, my former colleague, and briefly, very briefly, more than that. A momentary indiscretion during a business trip when Emily was 2 years old, when Robert and I had been going through a rough patch. A mistake I'd regretted immediately, that I'd never repeated, that I'd spent decades trying to forget. Could he be? The timing would align for Emily, but not for Jacob. I tried to remember if there had been anyone else, any other moment of weakness that could explain Jacob's paternity, and then it hit me. The dates were wrong. According to these test results, neither child was Robert's, but I knew with absolute certainty that Jacob at least had to be. There had been no one else during that time, no possibility of another father, which meant the tests themselves were suspect. Fabricated, perhaps? But why would Robert create false evidence of non-paternity for children that might actually be his? Unless a cold realization washed over me. What if the fertility diagnosis was real? But Robert had known about it before we married. Before we started trying for children? What if he'd married me knowing he could never father children, then used the inevitable discovery of non-paternity as leverage, as a secret form of control? It would explain the letter never sent, the tests conducted. In secret, the careful documentation preserved all these years, not as evidence of my betrayal, but as insurance, something he could reveal if I ever stepped out of line, if I ever became inconvenient. And now, facing divorce and financial ruin, with his carefully constructed life falling apart, he needed that insurance more than ever. He needed to retrieve this hard drive before I discovered it, before I could unravel the complex web of lies he'd been weaving for decades. I copied all the files to my laptop, then replaced the hard drive in the safety deposit box exactly as I'd found it. Let Robert think his secrets were still secure. Let him continue believing he held the upper hand. He lied about being sterile? Meredith's voice rose in disbelief. We were sitting in her office after hours, the city lights twinkling outside, her window as the sun set. For your entire marriage? I think so. I pushed the fertility clinic letter across her desk. The date on this is 17 years ago, but the language suggests the condition is congenital, something he would have known about before we married, before we started trying for children. But why? What could he possibly gain from such an elaborate deception? Control. The word tasted bitter on my tongue. He created evidence that our children weren't his, evidence he could reveal at any time if I ever became problematic. It was the ultimate insurance policy. Meredith studied the documents thoughtfully. And you're certain Jacob, at least, must be his biological child? Absolutely certain. There was no one else during that time. Not even the remotest possibility. Then the paternity tests must be fraudulent. She tapped her fingers on the desk. Likely created with the help of this private investigator he hired. The question is, why go to such lengths? Why not just divorce you years ago if he believed you'd been unfaithful? Because this gave him something more valuable than freedom, I said slowly. The full scope of Robert's manipulation becoming clearer with each passing moment. It gave him leverage, secret knowledge he could hold over me for decades, shaping our marriage in ways I never even realized. And now he's desperate to retrieve that evidence before you discover it. Meredith's expression hardened. Because once you know his secret, his power is gone. Not just that, I added. If these falsified medical records and paternity tests became public, his reputation would be destroyed. He'd be revealed as someone who created fraudulent medical evidence, who lied about his own children's paternity, who maintained a decades-long deception for the sake of control. It would destroy him professionally, possibly even lead to criminal charges. No wonder he's planning to flee the country, Meredith murmured. Once this comes to light. If it comes to light, I corrected her. We need to be certain before we make accusations this serious. Meredith studied me with newfound respect. Most people in your position would be out for blood right now. I've spent the past 3 decades married to a man I clearly never truly knew, I said wearily. I'm not going to compound that by rushing to judgment now. We need verification. The fertility clinic could confirm whether the diagnosis is genuine, and the DNA testing could be redone. I hesitated, the implications of such testing weighing heavily. Though that would mean involving Emily and Jacob. Do you want to do that? Bring your children into this? Did I? The question echoed in my mind. Emily and Jacob had already been drawn into the ugliness of the divorce more than I'd ever wanted. Learning that their father might have fabricated evidence to deny his paternity would be devastating. But keeping Robert's deception hidden, continuing, the lies he'd started, felt equally wrong. Not yet, I decided finally. First, let's confirm the fertility diagnosis. If that part is fraudulent, everything else falls into place. If it's genuine, then we'll need to consider next steps carefully. Meredith nodded. I'll have my investigator contact the clinic tomorrow. In the meantime, we should proceed with the flight risk injunction as planned. What about the settlement conference on Monday? We continue as scheduled. Let Robert think. Everything is proceeding normally while we build our case. She gathered the documents into a folder. Though I have to say, Diana, if what you're suggesting is true, if Robert deliberately created false medical evidence and paternity tests, we're no longer just talking about divorce proceedings. We're talking about potential criminal charges. The weight of that reality settled over me. In my quest for a fair divorce settlement, I'd inadvertently uncovered something far darker, far more disturbing than I could have imagined. My husband hadn't just been unfaithful or financially deceptive. He'd orchestrated an elaborate, years-long psychological manipulation designed to maintain control through the threat of a revelation that would never come, because there was nothing to reveal. No betrayal except his own. I returned home to find Emily waiting for me, curled up on the living room sofa with a glass of wine and a troubled expression. At 30, she looked so much like I had at her age. The same dark hair, the same determined set to her jaw, features I'd always attributed to some genetic alchemy of Robert and me combined. Now I wondered what other assumptions about my life had been quietly, insidiously false. "Hey, Mom." She straightened as I entered. "Sorry to drop by unannounced. Again. I just didn't want to be alone tonight." I sat beside her, grateful for her presence despite the turmoil of my discovery. "You never need an invitation to come home." "Jacob told me he spoke with you about Dad trying to recruit him." She tucked her legs beneath her, looking suddenly younger, more vulnerable. "He tried the same thing with me yesterday. Said you were becoming unhinged with vendetta, that someone needed to protect you from yourself." My heart twisted at Robert's manipulation of our children. "I'm sorry he put you in that position." "Don't be." I told him I'd already seen the evidence of his affairs, that I knew exactly who needed protection in this situation. A small, fierce smile touched her lips. He didn't like that very much. I squeezed her hand, pride momentarily displacing my distress. That must have taken courage. It was actually kind of liberating. She took a sip of wine. But that's not why I came over. After our conversation, Dad seemed desperate, more than usual. He kept talking about needing to secure his legacy, about making sure Jacob and I knew how much he loved us, regardless of the past. The phrasing sent a chill through me. Was Robert preparing to reveal his discovery about their paternity? Laying groundwork for the bombshell he'd held in reserve all these years? Did he elaborate on what he meant by that? Emily shook her head. He was being deliberately vague. But he mentioned wanting to set up trust for us that you couldn't touch, even after the divorce. Like he was worried you might try to cut us off financially, or something equally ridiculous. "That's absurd," I said, indignation flaring. "I would never—" "I know, Mom. That's why it was so weird. It's like he's creating this whole alternate reality where you're the villain and he's the protective father." She hesitated. "There's something else." After our argument, I went back to his office to collect the rest of his personal items like he'd asked. I found something strange. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small velvet pouch. This was hidden in a hollowed-out book in his credenza. I probably shouldn't have taken it, but after everything with the photos and the paternity test, I was suspicious. I opened the pouch to find a USB drive, unmarked except for a small initial, R engraved on one side. "Have you looked at what's on it?" I asked. "No. It felt like crossing a line somehow, but I thought you should have it, just in case." I rolled the small device between my fingers, wondering what new revelations it might contain. More evidence of affairs, additional financial records, or perhaps something related to the fabricated paternity tests. "Thank you for bringing this to me," I said. "It might be important." Emily studied my face. "You're not telling me everything, are you? You've discovered something else about Dad." Her perceptiveness had always been remarkable, a trait that had served her well in her career as a marketing executive. I considered deflecting, protecting her from the ugly truth a little longer. But she deserved honesty, especially now. "I have," I admitted. "But I need to verify some facts before I can share it. I promise I'll tell you everything as soon as I'm certain." She nodded, accepting this with surprising equanimity. "Is it bad?" "It's complicated. And yes, If what I suspect is true, it's bad. Worse than the affairs? Worse than hiding assets? I hesitated, unsure how to characterize Robert's possible deception about his fertility and their paternity. It wasn't just about infidelity or money. It struck at the very foundation of our family's identity, at the trust that should exist between parents and children. Different, I said finally. If I'm right, it's a different kind of betrayal, one that affects you and Jacob directly. Fear flickered in her eyes. Mom, you're scaring me. I don't mean to, and it's possible I'm wrong, which is why I need to confirm some things first. I took her hand. Just give me a little time. By Monday, I should know more. Emily seemed about to press further, but my phone rang. Catherine's number flashing on the screen. I need to take this, I apologized, stepping into the kitchen for privacy. Diana. Catherine's voice was tense. Robert just called me again. He wants to meet tomorrow. Said he has something important to discuss about our shared history. He sounded agitated, almost frantic. Did he say what specifically? No, but he mentioned medical records and correcting misunderstandings from the past. Does that mean anything to you? My grip tightened on the phone. Yes, it means he's accelerating his timeline. He's going to try to use his evidence about the children's paternity as leverage in the divorce, probably to force me to drop the financial claims in exchange for keeping his fabricated secret. What evidence? What fabrication? Catherine's confusion was evident. Diana, what have you discovered? I explained my findings from the safety deposit box, the fertility diagnosis, the paternity tests, the unsent letter, and my theory that Robert had known about his sterility before our marriage, creating a long-term deception that gave him invisible power in our relationship. My God, she breathed when I finished. That's diabolical. And now he's panicking because he can't access the original documentation. He needs to retrieve it before the settlement conference on Monday. A thought struck me. What if we use his meeting with you to confirm my theory? How? If you imply you know about his fertility issues, something only the two of you would have discussed during your marriage, watch his reaction. If he's genuinely surprised that you know, if he becomes defensive or evasive, we'll have our confirmation. Catherine was silent for a moment, considering. It's risky. If he suspects we're coordinating, he might accelerate his plans to leave the country. We don't have a choice. The injunction won't be in place until Monday at the earliest. If he tries to flee before then. You're right. Her decision was swift, decisive. I'll meet him tomorrow as planned. Draw him out about the fertility issues. Gauge his reaction. But Diana, be careful with that USB drive. There's no telling what might be on it. After we hung up, I returned to the living room to find Emily asleep on the sofa, her wineglass empty on the coffee table. She looked peaceful in sleep, unburdened by the complexities that had come to define our lives these past weeks. I covered her with a throw blanket, then sat in the armchair opposite, turning the USB drive over in my hands. Whatever secrets it contained could wait until morning. For now, I needed to prepare for what was coming. A confrontation that would either expose Robert's decades of deception or reveal that I had fundamentally misunderstood the man I'd married. Either way, by Monday, everything would change. Monday, morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. The USB drive Emily had discovered contained exactly what I'd suspected. Backups of the medical records and paternity tests, along with a draft of divorce papers Robert had prepared years ago, but never filed. Papers that cited my infidelity as grounds for divorce, that demanded full custody of the children based on my moral failings, that would have left me financially devastated and publicly humiliated. His insurance policy, preserved in digital form, ready to be deployed whenever necessary. But Catherine's meeting with him had confirmed my theory beyond any doubt. When she'd casually mentioned his fertility issues from back in our day, Robert had nearly choked on his coffee, his composure shattering completely. "How did you—" he'd sputtered before collecting himself. "That was a misdiagnosis. Completely inaccurate." "Really?" Catherine had pressed. "Because I still have our medical records from the fertility specialist. Dr. Brenner was quite clear about your condition being congenital and permanent." According to Catherine, Robert's face had drained of color. "Those records were supposed to be destroyed decades ago. I kept copies for insurance." She'd let the implication hang in the air between them. "Just like you've kept your own insurance, I imagine." He'd ended the meeting abruptly after that, but the damage was done. His reaction confirmed everything. He'd known about his sterility before our marriage, had deliberately created a fiction of betrayal he could hold over me indefinitely. The flight risk injunction had been granted late Sunday evening, effectively trapping Robert within the country's borders. Meredith's investigator had also confirmed with the original fertility clinic that Robert had first been diagnosed at age 22, 3 years before we met, 5 years before we married. Everything was in place for the settlement conference, scheduled for 10 a.m. Everything except my decision about what to tell Emily and Jacob. I found them both in my kitchen that morning, making coffee and toast as if it were any ordinary Monday. They'd stayed the night by unspoken agreement, a family, closing ranks in crisis. Neither knew yet what I'd discovered, what their father had done. "Morning, Mom." Jacob pushed a mug of coffee toward me. "Ready for the big showdown?" I managed a smile. "As ready as I'll ever be." Emily studied my face. "You figured it out, didn't you? What was on the USB drive?" "Yes." I took a deep breath. "And there's something I need to tell you both before the meeting." They listened in stunned silence as I explained Robert's deception, the deliberate concealment of his sterility, the fabricated paternity tests, the years of psychological leverage he'd maintained through his secret knowledge of their supposed illegitimacy. "So he's known all along that we're not his?" Jacob asked, his voice hollow. "No," I corrected gently. "He created false evidence to suggest you're not his, but that evidence was fabricated. The paternity tests were faked." Emily's brow furrowed. "How can you be sure?" I hesitated, not wanting to share details of my personal history that might hurt them. "Because the timing doesn't work for Jacob. There was no possibility of another father." I reached for their hands across the kitchen table. "You are both Robert's biological children. I'm certain of it." "So he lied about being sterile?" Jacob tried to process this twist. "Or he lied about the test results." "He lied about when he learned about his sterility," I explained. "The condition is real, confirmed by the original clinic. But he knew before we married, before we started trying for children. He deliberately married me knowing he couldn't father children, then created this elaborate fiction about my supposed infidelity." "But why?" Emily's voice cracked. "What could he possibly gain from something so twisted?" "Control," I said simply. "The power to destroy our family at any moment if I ever became inconvenient. And now, leverage in the divorce." Jacob pushed back from the table, anger radiating from him in waves. "I'll kill him. I swear to God, Mom, I'll—" "No." I caught his arm. "That's exactly what he wants. To turn us against each other, to create chaos he can exploit. We're going to handle this the right way." Emily wiped away tears. "What's the right way to handle discovering your father is a monster?" I had no perfect answer, only the path that felt least destructive. "We confront him with the truth, all of us together, united." The conference room at Meredith's law firm was designed to intimidate, all sleek surfaces and imposing artwork, a silent assertion of power. Robert and his attorney, Lawrence Hayes, were already seated when we arrived, both looking confident despite the flight risk injunction that had been served the previous evening. Robert's expression shifted from smugness to confusion when he saw Emily and Jacob enter behind me and Meredith. This wasn't part of the script he'd prepared for. "What are they doing here?" he demanded. "This is a private legal proceeding." "They're here because what we're discussing directly concerns them," I replied calmly, taking my seat across from him. "Their paternity, specifically." The blood drained from Robert's face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you do." I nodded to Meredith, who placed a folder on the table. "We've recovered the original medical records from your fertility. Diagnosis at age 22. We've also found the falsified paternity tests you created to suggest Emily and Jacob aren't your biological children." Hayes leaned toward Robert, whispering urgently, but Robert waved him off, his eyes never leaving mine. "Whatever you think. You've found," he said coldly. "It doesn't change the fact that you were unfaithful. That these children are yours," I interrupted. "Biologically, legally, in every way that matters. The paternity tests were fabricated, Robert. We've confirmed it with the lab listed on the reports. They have no record of such testing ever being conducted." Robert's composure began to crack. "You can't prove that." "Actually, we can," Meredith interjected smoothly. "The private investigator you hired, Mr. Delaney, has provided a sworn statement detailing how you paid him to create fake medical records and paternity test results 15 years ago. This was a bluff. We had no such statement." But Robert's reaction confirmed its truth. His face contorted with fury, any pretense of control abandoned. "You think you're so clever," he spat. "So righteous. You have no idea what it's like, living with the knowledge that you can never father children, watching your wife's stomach grow with someone else's." "They are your children!" I slammed my hand on the table. "And you've known that all along. Your condition may be real, but it's not absolute. You were told there was a minuscule chance you could still father children naturally. It happened, Robert, twice. But rather than accept that miracle, you chose to believe the worst about me, to create this elaborate fiction you could hold over my head for decades." Emily leaned forward, her voice trembling with emotion. "How could you do this to us? To Mom? All these years pretending to be this loving father while secretly believing we weren't yours? While creating evidence you could use to hurt us all if necessary?" Robert's gaze shifted between our children, something like genuine pain flickering across his features. "It wasn't like that. I loved you, both of you, regardless of biology. I chose to raise you as my own." "No," Jacob said, his disgust evident. "You chose to use us as weapons against Mom. You stored up ammunition for 28 years, waiting for the perfect moment to detonate our lives." Robert turned to his attorney. "This is ridiculous. I want them removed." Hayes, looking increasingly uncomfortable, cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should take a brief recess to discuss." "No," I said firmly. "No more delays, no more manipulation. Here's what's going to happen, Robert. You're going to sign the settlement agreement Meredith has prepared, which gives me half of all marital assets, including those you've hidden offshore. You're going to withdraw your objection to the eviction notice for Caroline's condo. And you're going to provide a written statement admitting to the creation of fraudulent medical documentation." "Or what?" His eyes narrowed. "You'll destroy our children by going public with all this?" "We're already destroyed," Emily said quietly. "By you." The room fell silent, the weight of decades of deception hanging heavy in the air. Robert looked from Emily to Jacob, perhaps truly seeing for the first time the damage his machinations had caused. "You have a choice," I continued. "Sign the agreement now, give us the closure we deserve, and we'll keep the details of your fraud private. Refuse, and we'll pursue criminal charges for falsifying medical records, perjury, and attempted extortion." Robert stared at me, the man I'd spent nearly 3 decades with, suddenly a stranger. "You wouldn't. Try me." My voice was steady, certain. "You said I was too old to love, Robert. But I'm exactly the right age for justice. His shoulders slumped, the fight visibly draining from him. Without a word, he gestured for Hayes to hand him the settlement agreement. He signed each page mechanically, not bothering to read the terms. When he finished, he looked up at our children, something like regret in his eyes. "I never meant for this to happen." "Yes, you did," Jacob replied coldly. "You just never meant to get caught." 1 month later, the lake house had always been my sanctuary, my inheritance from my father that Robert had never managed to claim. Now, sitting on the dock with my feet dangling in the cool water, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in years. The divorce was finalized, the settlement executed. Robert had moved to Seattle to start his new firm. Any dreams of international escape abandoned once the truth of his deception came to light. Caroline had found a new apartment, and according to office gossip, a new boyfriend closer to her own age. The house on Maple Street was sold, the proceeds divided as agreed. I'd bought a smaller place closer to downtown, a fresh start in a space, untainted by lies. Emily and Jacob were healing in their own ways. They'd both refused contact with Robert for now, though I'd encouraged them to keep the door open for reconciliation someday, if they chose. Some wounds required distance before they could begin to mend. As for me, I was discovering who Diana Ross might be outside the confines of a marriage built on deception. At 53, I was dating again, cautiously, selectively. Last week, I'd had dinner with Martin Hoffman, Robert's former partner, who'd reached out after the divorce was finalized. It wasn't serious yet, but it was nice to be seen, to be valued for exactly who I was. My phone buzzed with a text from Catherine. "Lunch tomorrow? I've been appointed department chair and need someone to celebrate with." I smiled, typing back my congratulations and acceptance. Our unlikely friendship had become one of the unexpected gifts of this ordeal. 2 women who'd survived the same man's manipulation, now supporting each other's triumphs. The sun was setting, over the lake, painting the water in shades of gold and pink. In the growing twilight, I could just make out the silhouette of a loon diving beneath the surface, disappearing momentarily before emerging elsewhere, free and unburdened. I thought about Robert's cruel words that night he'd left, that I reminded him of his mortality, that I was too old, too settled, too predictable, how those words had cut me to the core, making me question my worth, my desirability, my place in the world. Now I understood they had never really been about me at all. They were the desperate justifications of a man terrified of his own secrets. Coming to light, a man who'd spent decades constructing elaborate fictions to maintain control. I was 53, not too old for love, but perfectly aged for wisdom. Old enough to recognize truth when I finally uncovered it, brave enough to face it head on, and resilient enough to build something new from the wreckage of what was lost. The loon surfaced again, closer to the dock this time. It regarded me with serene indifference before diving once more, leaving expanding ripples across the previously still water. I watched those ripples spread and fade, understanding that some disturbances, no matter how momentous they seem, eventually give way to calm. And in that calm, there is room to begin again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.